I had a few people ask me about the Gamespot article with the headline, "Let's be honest, WWE's Attitude Era is kind of terrible," which is just the clickbaitiest of clickbaity articles. So naturally, I clicked on it. This writer, Chris Hayner is his name. He makes his case, about how awful the Attitude Era was and how it does not hold up. And he mentions beaver cleavage, he mentions choppy choppy your pee-pee, and Katie Vick, which, it's a funny thing. I don't consider Katie Vick to be part of the Attitude Era, even though I guess it kind of was. But in my brain, when I classify these different time periods in WWE, I don't associate that with the Attitude Era. You know, but again, 2002 to me, and that was late 2002, almost 03 at that point. To me, that's not the Attitude Era. In my mind, the Attitude Era died the moment that Stone Cold shook hands with Vince McMahon at WrestleMania 17. That is the day that Attitude died. Then came the Invasion Era, and then people have, Ruthless Aggression, but then there's sort of a gap in the middle, and people have different names for these different, and I've ranked them before, actually. I've told, what I think each era is and how long they go for. And I don't know. It's just I don't really look at it as sort of attitude proper, if that makes any sense. But again, every person will classify things differently. The point is, he highlighted all of the lowlights of the Attitude Era and said nothing about all of the positives, like the stars that were created during that time period, because in part they had a lot more freedom than they do today. The rise of certain characters that were so important, like the Mr. McMahon character, The Rock, Stone Cold, obviously, but the Undertaker and Kane storyline, which at least at first was, this great storyline, and it created this long-lasting legendary character in Kane. Triple H's rise and his feud with Cactus Jack. He was really bothered. It sounded like this guy was also really bothered mostly by the company's treatment of women during this period. And look, he's not wrong. There were a lot of very cringeworthy moments during that era. Trish Stratus on all fours, barking like a dog. I don't know what WWE did, but there must have been something that happened a number of years ago where they have all but wiped, or at least at one point they did, all but wipe that clip off of the internet. Now, I'm sure you can still find it on Raw on the network. I would think so. And maybe other people have uploaded it to Dailymotion since then or whatever, but there was a period where you couldn't even find that online. This company was running as far from that clip as they possibly could because it was an embarrassment. It was an embarrassment then, and it's an embarrassment today. I will absolutely 100% agree with you on that. And then all those other moments of Vince McMahon sticking his tongue down half the women's throats on the roster. But to paint that era with a broad brush and say that it was a pretty terrible because of a few really dumb, stupid characters, and because the work rate isn't what it is today. Yes, if you're going to compare the Attitude Era work rate-wise to the era of today, there is far more of a focus and a reliance on the in-ring aspect now than there was then. Because back then, those guys could work, but it was more character-driven. It was more character and storyline driven. And in large part because there was a wrestling war going on during much of that period, which it seems like now things are bubbling up, and who knows what the landscape is going to look like 3 years from now. But there's hardly been much in the way of real competition, certainly not on Monday nights for WWE, in many, many years. So what happens? They rest on their laurels and they can afford to be more conservative in their approach and just rule with an iron fist and do things the way they want to do and script everything to the point of just nausea. But back then, you were fighting fire with fire, and whatever the competition was doing, we had to one-up them, and we had to be able to do it better, and we had to put on a product that was going to keep people from changing the channel. And so they were hot-shotting title matches, and they were hot-shotting pay-per-view matches on free TV, and throwing shit at the wall to see what sticks. But to compare the two, well, the Attitude Era sucked because now the matches today are, they're just so much better. Look, 18-year-old me, 18-year-old Solomonster, okay, was not much bothered by the work rate. I just wanted to go to the shows and have fun. Or watch them on television and just be entertained. The character development back then as compared to now, the promos back then as compared to now, it was way more character driven. I miss that. That's one of the things that is really missing from WWE today. I heard Sheamus talk about this recently, of all people. Sheamus did an interview and he was talking, I miss characters. He was talking about the importance of having characters on these shows. I miss that. And don't get me started on the overly scripted promos. But, the author here says he would much rather take the man Becky Lynch and the new Daniel Bryan over the Attitude Era stuff. Look, I like Becky Lynch, and I like evil environmentalist Daniel Bryan. But because he's a character, right? He's a character that I guarantee you a lot of what he says is just mirroring what he thinks in real life. But still, he's playing up a character. That's the sort of thing I miss. He's been giving interviews all week long in Phoenix leading up to the pay-per-view tonight, in character, mostly, and it's been entertaining as all hell. He has to stop himself in most of these interviews at the end from cracking up on screen. He's having fun with it. I miss that. We don't see enough of that now. Especially out in public. When they're out giving media interviews like this, they're all very buttoned up and very conservative in the company and be a star and all. I enjoy this. I enjoy Daniel Bryan ragging on this dumbass reporter for talking about some stupid hamburger. And going after him and going after Chase Field. I enjoy that. But I scrolled down to the end of his article. So I read through this entire thing, and I get to the very end of the article. And I see this line. Today's wrestling product, not just in WWE, but in companies like Ring of Honor and the newly announced All Elite Wrestling, flies high above what fans were given on a weekly basis during the Attitude Era. Are you kidding me? He cites All Elite Wrestling? All Elite Wrestling has yet to run a single show. They don't even have a TV deal yet. They don't have a TV show. But somehow it flies high above the Attitude Era. And this is a great example of what I have been saying about people who take it too far with the hyperbole and just all the hype around this thing. What's going to end up happening is you're going to turn people against the product. You're going to kill AEW before it even has a chance to grow by saying stupid things like this. They don't even have a full roster yet. They haven't promoted a single match. Yet it flies above the Attitude Era. What an insanely stupid thing to say. I got almost all the way through, and then I hit that line, and it was like a ton of bricks just completely fell on my head. And I felt dumber for having read that part. And he finished the thing at the end. He said, to put it simply, I'd rather watch just about any era of WWE than live through the Attitude Era again. So that's the big statement, the big opinion that he ends on. I will happily take a 2-hour Attitude Era Raw with a bunch of short, crappy matches over a 3-hour Groundhog Day rerun of Monday Night Raw. And I say that as somebody who does appreciate work rate a lot more now than I did when I was younger. When you're a kid, honestly, how many kids care about that? When you were a kid, what do you remember? Think back hard. When you were a WWF fan, when you were an NWA fan, what do you remember? If you were an NWA fan, you probably remember the Road Warriors and Sting and the Four Horsemen and Dusty Rhodes and all those great promos, or the beating down Dusty, certain angles like that and injuries that you remember. You're not thinking to yourself, boy, I remember that match between Sting and Ric Flair, and what a great technical wrestling match that was. I think back to my childhood, I think of Hulk Hogan and the Macho Man and the $1 Million Man kicking a kid's basketball away from him. Andre the Giant beating Hogan for the championship with this horrible, even as a kid I knew it was horrible looking hip toss or whatever the hell it was that he was trying to do. the evil Hebner twin angle and you know, the Mega Powers and the Ultimate Warrior and his insane promos and the colorful characters and the colorful attire. You know, those are the memories that I have that got me hooked on wrestling in the first place. Now, as you get older and you mature and you age, I think you come to appreciate the actual work more. You know, if the Great Khali came back to WWE today, I have no interest in seeing him in the ring wrestling. But if there's some little, you know, 5-year-old kid in the front row, he's probably looking up thinking, wow, look how big this guy is. Of course, the problem is that kids are only a small part of the audience now. This is the weird thing about WWE, that the large majority of their viewing audience is actually a lot older than I think it's ever been before. So you could say, oh, they cater to kids. Yeah, the problem is, though, those kids are just like a small portion of their actual audience. But based on the numbers lately, I don't get the sense that people are very sports entertained. I'm glad he is. But I pose that question to all of you. Not is the Attitude Era overrated? I think every era, to an extent, is overrated, and the Attitude Era is overrated in some ways. That's not the question I pose to you. The question I pose to you is the Attitude Era the worst era of all the eras in WWE history?